This song is actually post Napoleonic Wars. Because it actually mentions Waterloo in the song.
Rather late business, isn't it, Delancey? Killing. Shall I shut them up, sir? No. No. Indulgent. Anything that wastes time is good. Indulgent.
Again, Major de Lacy. I want to say Major de Lacy Evans was the commander of the British Auxiliary Legion, which was sort of the British government's totally not government troops sent over to fight in Spain, like a foreign legion type deal.
Who's the lad who levers the French? Who's the boy with the hooked nose?
No need of a white horse to puff me, by God.
Who gives salt to march the suit?
You can see the front two things in the saddle there are actually pistols. So while he looks unarmed, he's actually packing 2 pistols and a saber. Wings and centre company things not correct, but we won't nitpick. Grenadiers on the left, they should be on the right. Anyway, doesn't matter. I love the entourages they have the generals with, because it's real. It's true. Sorry, I got that on. Should turn that off. Sorry. A general would travel with a huge group of, well, not like 20 officers or so. They had a general would not be. Oh, look at this. You can actually see a whole bunch of hooked up sabers. It's also cool. But yeah, a general or a field marshal will be traveling with a huge entourage of officers and runners and all sorts of stuff. Is that meant to be Dr. Leray? I don't think so, because Leray would have been wearing actual military uniform. You do see him later on, though. You hear him. Again, it looks very wargamery, doesn't it? Like small battalions with guns.
He's on the right side. So that's what he's afraid of, is right. All right. Therefore, that's where we'll tease him. We'll have a diversionary action.
At Hougoumont.
We'll tease him on the right side. Then if he weakens...
Napoleon's maps were a little bit off, so he thought the distances were much closer on his maps than they were in reality. So,
then I'll know the caliber of this English aristocrat.
Technically he's Irish.
Gentlemen,
But he is English, but he was born in Ireland.
today's fox.
Bit of claret.
Clever chap, your tailor, hey?
Dunmore and Locks, in St. James, Your Grace.
Remind me of that, Delancey. I always like my men well dressed for the enemy.
Picton cops so much crap for not having uniform at Waterloo. I put that on mute. Why is that making noise? He wore a uniform all the time except for this one occasion. It followed him for the rest of his, well, not for the rest of his sort of his history sort of thing. Blah blah blah. Napoleon has a son. Napoleon's son actually died in his mid-20s. So this whole like my son and my legacy all sort of thing is actually pretty tragic when you think about it. His son died childless, and his nephew took over the running of this the French Empire, which he refounded, and then royally screwed up and lost. They're actually in a war, the Franco-Prussian War, and in the middle of the war, the French kicked the emperor out, and then just kept fighting the war. So they had a civil war coup in the middle of an actual war. A total disaster. But it meant there were a lot of Remington single shots available for World War One, which is interesting in and of itself, but not pertinent to this. We still don't really know what the ridge at Waterloo looked like, because the Belgians destroyed it to build that horrendously ugly monument thing. Wellington was really pissed at that. That's Hougoumont there. That's much closer than it would have been in real life. You can see the French guns with the steering things at the back. These here are sort of like you pick it up and move it around with those. Whereas the British have a crowbar type deal though, yeah. Something like that.
We'll begin the attack there.
At Hougoumont. So you have Hougoumont, La Haye-Saint, and Place-Noire on the other side. Hougoumont is defended by the Guards. La Haye-Saint is defended by the 2nd King's German Legion Rifles, 2nd Light Battalion, King's German Legion, which have lost all their ammunition except 60 rounds. And the defense of that is really interesting. As I've said before, I've got a video on that.
Well, that opens the ball.
Remember, Wellington is stalling.
35 minutes past 11.
Yep, Wellington is definitely stalling. Accurate watches was a problem that wouldn't be solved for a long time after this. And it was actually
Thank you, gentlemen.
up until the early 1900s. Watches were still not perfectly accurate enough to be completely reliable. So even though these watches might be synced at the moment, they can go out of sync quite easily. Especially if you're jumping around a big friggin' horse. The main thing for that was on ships. 0 recoil, oh look at delayed recoil. No recoil at all, those guns be flying back tens of feet. Yep, yeah, delayed. The guns really are where you see the I love Wellington just standing there. The sounds were obviously added after, otherwise those horses would just freaking the F out, as that one just did. And you would never stand behind a gun when it fired. Although the ambience is really there. The whole, the effect is there, you know what I mean? That's an exploding shell. There were exploding shells. Extremely rare. The British had shrapnel. The British had shrapnel for a few years now. The French didn't. They couldn't copy it. Shrapnel is actually named after, he ended up being, I think, General or Lieutenant Colonel Shrapnel. He's actually named after a man called Shrapnel, who was an artillery officer who designed the round. Oh yeah, what's his name? De Lacy would actually give him a special commendation in Parliament. De Lacy ended up being a politician. He would actually give special thanks to Shrapnel for coming up with the Shrapnel round. The main assault on Hougoumont, or is this La Haye-Saint? I can never remember. Grenadiers in red, by the way, for those who don't know. Down he goes. This way you don't advance over rough ground. Officer dead, of course, good shooting. Hougoumont. I don't know an awful lot about Hougoumont. I know it's defended by the Guards. And this was the one that was actually fortified. The engineers from the 2nd KGL were actually sent to Hougoumont to fortify it. A lot of defense. La Haye-Saint seems to get a lot of the fame, but Hougoumont was a big deal. So. Oh, I got shot. Classic. I love the old set. This is filmed in the 70s or late 60s. I love the. Oh, it's great. Wouldn't have been anywhere near as quick as this. It would have been probing attacks, and then skirmish duels. And then the main thing would have come up and got pushed back after like half a dozen casualties or a dozen. Come on again. These sort of things were much more teased out than they were brutal.
What the master seems to intend and what he does will be as different as
White Knight to Black Bishop.
We can quickly move the 95th down, sir.
I do not intend to run
95th Rifles, of course. Who were scattered pretty much at this point.
Time, sir.
Company 95th in the sandpit outside La Haye-Saint, for example. I think it was the Grenadiers of the Scots Guards, the 3rd Battalion, or the 1st. Sorry, the 3rd Regiment, the 1st Regiment. I can't remember which is the Scots Guards. And this is La Haye-Saint, which is why I always get confused because the footage is so similar. Quite common to do this. Have someone stand there and use the thing as a rest. You could also have tripod-mounted telescopes. In the American Civil War, they really made good use of tripod mounts. It was long-range viewing technology come quite far since then.
He hasn't moved.
Here we have a general writing down orders. Aide-de-camp's ready to take those orders to people. Black normally represents aide-de-camp, but it doesn't always. Can represent, I should say. Men sitting down. Quite common again. Good luck finding wargaming rules for it, but yeah, men lying down and sitting down was something that happened.
It seems he's swinging his way to you, Picton.
I've never seen guns move so smoothly.
Again, really bad overlays.
I doubt a balanced brigade will stand.
I think the same guy did Picton's voices, a couple of other voices. Basically, they went through in post and had to just replace a bunch of actors' voices with this voiceover. And it's quite funny.
Never mind. Let him have a taste of it.
If they don't run first.
Picton was quite fond of flogging troops, and but his 3rd Division in the Peninsula was excellent. It was one of the best divisions. Picton was no coward either. He was wounded taking Batahov. He's one of the reasons Batahov was even taken. His division got over the walls, and they pushed on even further, which is quite good. Sorry, they took the little castle outside Batahov, and then Picton pushed them in.
So we'll have to meet them in the same open style.
The whole myth that Picton was shot in the head from someone behind him, complete nonsense. He was killed with a cannonball. It was complete nonsense. And it didn't shoot his top hat, unlike the movie shows. They were really toned down the gore for this. I'm not sure if that's just a period thing.
This one's going to take.
You can make a really good R-rated Waterloo today, with just like limbs getting blown off and men shredded with canister fire, which would be especially cavalry. That'd be really cool. Infantry are very close. They'll be a little bit further spaced apart than this. Here we see this, the NCOs giving out gin or rum, depending on your regiment. For the Irish would probably be whiskey. Man, they're praying a rosary.
Dick? No, thank you.
Great for you, standing next to a man who doesn't drink. Just get 2.
Have a sup of gin.
You wouldn't want your troops completely drunk, but a bit of gin, you know, doesn't settle the shakes a little. Yeah, steady your shakes, that sort of thing.
To see through a hell, it's like the whole of blood.
Again, he's wearing fringed epaulets that would be a flank company, but he's wearing a centre company shako.
Nothing frightens me more than being next to a friend of the Almighty.
Didn't get very far through his rosary. He's only on the 1st decade.
Then second, we'll prepare to advance.
Yeah, he didn't get through his... There are 5 decades to a rosary. 10 Hail Marys, glory be. At this time there wouldn't be a Fatima prayer, but then and Our Father, 10 Hail Marys and a glory be. And at this time it'd be in Latin. Drummer boys way out of sync. Okay, the myth with the drummer boys, right? The average age of a drummer in the British Army at Waterloo is 25. Yes, young children could be drummer boys, but musicians were soldiers. That was the British Army had actually ruled this in court during the 45 rebellion with the Jacobites. Musicians were soldiers. They ruled that music was such an integral part of combat that this was the case of a bagpiper who claimed that he played the bagpipes, therefore he didn't take up arms against the crown. And the British ruled that music was such an integral part of combat that playing an instrument was being a soldier, and therefore that was technically a weapon. And sometimes the older guys who were basically retiring and that sort of thing would be put in the band. Young guys could be put in the band. Maybe if you had connections to transfer the band, so you didn't have to do a lot of fighting. Yeah, the band was not just children, as you see there, because they can't carry the friggin' drums and beat in time. So yeah, the whole idea of this child drummer boy, while not completely inaccurate, is ridiculously overstretched. Most of your drummers and your fifers and that sort of thing would have been sort of young men to old men. So it's yeah. And here we see what's meant to be the Union Brigade, which is meant to be Irish Dragoons, Scots Greys, and then the Lifeguards or something like that. The English Hussars, called the Union Brigade because it's got the 3 countries of the Union. Wales, I don't think Wales counts. Dun, 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 dun. There's dispute whether or not the Scots Greys were wearing bearskins or something else, but bearskins looks cool. So Uxbridge in a very toned down Hussar uniform. I think his Hussar uniform would have been much more extravagant than that. Snuff.
Savage stuff, Ponsonby.
You don't see it's like anymore.
Ponsonby, by the way. I'm not sure why they call him Ponsonby. His name is Ponsonby.
An old Jew in Alexandria had the blend. My father, poor fellow, was killed by the French.
He wasn't. He just died in his home. This is foreshadowing his own death. His father had died just normally in his home. This foreshadows his own death here. Because he had better horses at home in the stable. He didn't have time to bring them over. He got killed in a wheat field by French lancers. Although we now believe what happened was he was bogged, and a bunch of French lancers come over to him and said, surrender. They knew who he was and they were going to get him to surrender. And then a bunch of Scots Greys turned up. We're talking like 5v5 or 3v3. And the Scots Greys tried to save Ponsonby, and the lancers just had to kill him because he wasn't surrendering and he was actively fighting against them, that sort of thing. So that's what we think happened now. It wasn't a massive massacre with like 9 lancers just slashing him down. It was much more of a, please surrender, what are you doing, stop, no, we don't want to kill you. And then a lancer killed him, and then the same guy went on to kill like a whole bunch of Scots Greys. Sergeant Hewitt was famously in this, who captured a French eagle in this charge.
His horse got bogged in a ploughed field and the brute just gave up. 7 damn lancers had him like a tiger in a pit.
Again, not true.
Bad luck, they actually.
Damn bad luck.
Yes, particularly bad luck. He had 400 better horses at his stables at Hatton.
Okay, so some background. La Haye-Saint at this point is defended by a third of the men it should be. The garrison basically got charged with cavalry and had to scatter. At the start, they were defending the orchard, they were defending the garden, they were defending all the area around La Haye-Saint. After the first few things, they basically retreated inside the courtyard. The only problem was if you're in the courtyard and anyone gets they take the wall or they take a single gate, you're screwed, you have to retreat. So the courtyard was very precarious. But they stayed there for another 6 hours. So it wasn't too bad. But with La Haye-Saint being sort of lightly defended, the KGL brigades that were sent in to reinforce La Haye-Saint, the 8th got completely smashed. Or the 5th got smashed, or the 8th. I think the 8th got smashed. The 5th was now locked in a square, and the other regiment that was with them has basically been pulled back into somebody else. So there's a single battalion who's trying to advance towards La Haye-Saint. You can see all this in the La Haye-Saint video. But essentially the centre is being overrun. And this is when the cavalry deployed to give La Haye-Saint and the centre a breathing room. They're meant to push the French back and then retreat. British cavalry have this awful habit, which is just overcharging. The British cavalry suck at discipline. Wellington said, I'll match any French regiment for regiment, squadron for squadron, but he wouldn't put 4 against 4. He'd go 1-on-1, he'd go 2-on-1, but he wouldn't go 4-on-4. Because the French just had much better coordination, and the British had just no cavalry discipline at all. So that's why the cavalry charge here, because the centre is sort of getting pushed and overrun.
Violence brigade is broke.
Violence.
Please. Now's the time for the heavy cavalry, I think.
When Picton gets killed, his division stalls.
Get your bastards up onto the crest. I'll bring up the rest of the brigade.
Don't
Division.
worry yourself,
But,
Picton.
yeah.
My lads will hold them. Till you come.
Get
Bad voiceover
forward,
again.
damn your eyes.
The 92nd
Another bad voiceover.
Return, McKenna!
92nd very famous Highland Regiment. Again, they showed it's Scottish bagpipe is always shown as sort of grown men with beards and all this sort of stuff, but drummer boys are always shown as children. It's just quite weird.
Has Wellington nothing to offer me but these Amazons?
That's a real quote. A lot of the quotes in this movie are well, that's a really ragged line. They should fix that up real quick. That's much better. See that ragged crap before? If you got attacked by infantry, you'd be slaughtered. If you're not skirmishers operating in a skirmish formation, you're just basically a shattered unit. So you might as well have just you're basically the same as having just been routed. So you need to be in formation at this point in time to be effective, because a formation will just wipe you away. Unless you're proper skirmishers. That can't be Mercer. Because Mercer was in the rocket artillery, not of course. Oh, sorry, horse artillery. Did I say rocket? I've been saying rocket artillery, horse artillery, sorry. Oh, look at this undisciplined firing here. Look at this nonsense. Proper shakos with the proper uniforms, quite good. How does getting shot in the top hat kill you? I understand that it's meant to simulate something else, but he's hit with a cannonball, like a ricocheting cannonball, or a shot to the gut. So
Now, Scots Greys! Now!
That's actually real. All these are real bugle calls too, by the way. You can hear these in other movies too, because they're all based on real bugle calls. You wouldn't be presenting quite yet. You also wouldn't be going anywhere near this fast. There's a great video of I think it's in 1912 or maybe even after the war, of French cuirassiers, like more modern stuff. French cuirassiers charging full pelt in double lines. I think 3 squadrons of double rank. And it's chaos, like the whole thing's just melting around, and you hear cavalry charges at the walker at the like a slow trot. To have cavalry going this fast, you have no freaking coordination whatsoever, which is a problem for the British. Like, look how orderly this is. It just gets completely ragged when you start galloping. That was the problem. As soon as their commanders were killed, no one was there to stop them. I think Reynolds, Reginald or Reynolds, the commander of the Scots Greys, was killed as well. So Ponsonby Brigade, the guy in charge of the Union Brigade, was killed, and the head of the Scots Greys was also killed. But of course, officers weren't doing any combat; they were way behind the lines, sipping cognac or whatever.
Those men on grey horses are terrifying.
They are the noblest cavalry in Europe and the worst led.
That may be. That may be.
That's a nice battery fire there. Those are poles with the Zapkas. Just double checking I'm actually recording. Yeah, this is what happens when you gallop. Look at this ragged mess of crap. That wouldn't do absolute jack if that hit a formed up thing of infantry. This next scene is based on a very famous painting. I'm actually pretty impressed they managed to recreate this this thing here. You see how ragged and crappy this is? Like, that wouldn't do jack. You have to keep your cavalry under control. Or at least in formation, and then unleash them at the last minute. You can't have this nonsense. This is based on a very famous painting. Horses were generally, they tried to put the same colour with the same regiment, but that what goes out the window the second you enter combat. It also goes out the window when you just can't find the coloured horses. But the Scots Greys they really tried to go for grey horses for the Scots Greys. Even today, I think they have grey horses still. Or at least part of the regiment does. Ponsonby would have been wearing a different uniform, that doesn't matter.
Sound the recall!
Again, the problem with, modern day, you'd have a radio, you could just radio in. You can't really hear that bugle over the massive, there'd be constant gunfire. And cannons and everything.
Stop that useless noise. You'll hurt yourself.
I always love that. No recoil. This happened, they actually charged the guns. Not quite as bad as Balaclava, but it was it was pretty bad. The Union Brigade was shattered after this. They lost their cavalry. This way charging waves, by the way. Hit with the first wave, and then the second wave would hit a little bit later. A couple of seconds later, but enough time. Cavalry on cavalry duels when they're both stationary would just be brutal. That's why you almost never see it. That's a really piss-weak cannon. You see him spiking a gun there? That's quite good. I'm pointing at something you can't see. But they were spiking a gun where you put a thing in it and belt it down with a hammer. All these guys would be carrying gun spikes and nails and hammers, really. I think this is meant to be Reynolds next to him there. Most of Waterloo would have looked like this muddy field too.
Give these to my son. Right on.
Why would you not try and surrender here? Like, it's perfectly honourable to surrender. Ridiculously, like that. If yeah, the officer who caught them doing that would be extremely pissed that they had done that. Yeah, again, you don't really do this to officers. You don't deliberately chase them down and murder them. I mean, if you can do it, yeah, fine. But you would obviously want to take that as a prisoner, because one, you get to go away if you have a prisoner. If you have a prisoner, you don't have to be where the killing and the guys with the swords and the guns are. You can take the prisoner, but like, oh, I got to take this prisoner back, and me and my friends have to do it because he might run away. Blah blah blah. This is also a thing with wounded men. We know that the KGL in La Haye Sainte were actually quite good because they would actually take the wounded men back and then return. The guys would normally just like, oh, my friend's wounded. Me and 3 other guys are going to drag this one guy away. So your casualty of 1 man now turns into 5 because they're obviously not coming back. Again, there's just cannon left behind. You would try and establish that.
France would hang. Maybe France would be right.
Grouchy should have marched to the guns.
What's moving there?
Prussians.
I see men marching in column.
All cuirassiers and carbineers in the background, nice. The background is where this movie really shines. Look at all these different officers. You have the chasseurs à cheval, you have orderlies. There was just a carbineer and a cuirassier come back. If you were a general of division of a cuirassier thing, you would normally wear a cuirass, an armoured breastplate, which would be very cool, because at least you'll have some protection. If I had to be a Napoleonic general, I would, and had to be a French Napoleonic general, I would definitely want to be heavy cavalry commander. Because number one, your job is freaking awesome because you charge in when the enemy's weak. And you can see where they've retaken shots here, by the way, the marching anyway. But then you get to wear a piece of armour.
It's what we feared, sir. Grouchy has come across.
Damn it, it could be Prussian black.
Hence why you should make the uniforms different, like a Russian green or an Austrian white. British red would have stood out like nice.
Hey, your eyes are young. You tell me the color.
He's also been dead for 2 days.
I think they're Russians.
Oh, look at that! This guy doesn't have a telescope. Look, he fakes it. How did that make it in the final cut? He just fakes it. I like how Marshal Ney's filthy too, because Ney was like a badass, running around doing all sorts of crazy stuff. He entered as a private, ended up as a field marshal. First man into Russia, last man out. Ney was a friggin' machine. Although he was pretty psychologically damaged at this point. He'd have a lot of these men die. Take La Haye Sainte, yep. Ney's corps was basically charged after Hollande's corps had sort of failed to take it. Ney was sort of sent in as backup. Cavalry can't really operate around La Haye Sainte, which is one of the few things that saved him. Look at all the guys running around the background. How cool is that? Although we don't see Mamluk Ali, which was Napoleon's like personal butler from Egypt. And under his uniform, Napoleon would be wearing one of these chasseurs à cheval uniforms. That's that green thing that he wears all the time.
I need those men. Where is Grouchy?
Heavy little tantrum.
I have to do everything myself.
Genocidal madman.
Sire,
Maybe not yet.
sire, are you wounded?
Baron Leray.
Lord Doctor, I advise you to come off the field, sire.
I've never been able to pinpoint which one is meant to be Leray, but one of these guys is Baron Leray, who my first ever video was made about. You should definitely check that out.
Sire, you must lie down for an hour.
So one of these guys is Leray. I think it's meant to be this guy, but he's got a Paul Emery, so it's probably not. That's what this is, by the way, Paul Emery. It's still given out today by the French. It probably might be this guy here. Oh, the uniform of the Doctor was quite the same. Could be this guy. Again, it's so hard to pin this down because he's not wearing the proper uniform. I'm not sure. Maybe they didn't even have a Baron Leray. They just sort of inserted a generic Doctor. He's basically got like just absolute taco diarrhea mixed with a bunch of other Mexican food and like just awful diarrhea. Like he's just had a massive thing of 2-minute noodles from the hardware store or something like that. So this is when Marshal Ney is basically given command of the army, or at least that's not correct. Marshal Ney is he's very senior and he's not really countermanded that much. He's not really technically in command. This is just blah blah blah. My son, my son, my son. I imagine this is quite powerful for an actual father, but for me it's just yeah. Cuirassiers moving up. 14 regiments of Cuirassiers, 2 of Carbineers. I'm not sure how many were at Waterloo, but those were the numbers. And be careful when you talk about regiments at Waterloo too, because a lot of the time they're quite low, and a lot of the time they're quite inexperienced. I love look at the background uniforms.
General Lambert will retire 100 paces between the reverse slopes.
But your grace!
Do as you're told, sir.
Yeah, don't talk back in the middle of combat. You just do what you're told. Oh, down he goes.
The army will retire 100 paces.
The army will retire 100 paces!
That looked like a pretty dodgy... I know this movie was actually... there's parts of this movie which are not allowed to be shown in certain countries because they're obviously using pretty brutal horse tripping techniques. So, yeah, again, this is filmed in the Soviet Union. A lot of these guys are actually Red Army soldiers. So, yeah, the whole animal safety thing is a bit out the window.
I'll take your impudent advice.
This is like 300 meters from La Haye-Saint, by the way, this famous oak tree. I love the cannibals hitting the place you just used to be. Again, cannibals don't explode. They bounce.
Wellington's retreating!
This is what happened. This is what happened, but this is the bit people have this is where the conspiracy theory sort of gets a bit weird. Did he genuinely do this? Was he psychologically damaged with PTSD type symptoms from Russia? Did he deliberately try and destroy the French army as some sort of inner plot? Did he generally just screw up? Like, this is where the conspiracy, this is the part that I don't really pay much attention to. And he actually fought with one of his commanders to actually get him to go. It wasn't just straight away. I'm not sure if Ney was a Catholic. I'm pretty sure Ney was a Freemason. But I've never been able to nail that down, whether or not he was a Catholic or not, because he did just cross himself like one. But Napoleon, even though he said he was, he definitely was not. He'd abducted the Pope, for goodness sake. He'd been excommunicated. Yeah, Napoleon was not a Catholic man. Yeah, when you abduct the Pope at gunpoint, you tend to get excommunicated. That's kind of like one of the worst things you can do. Ney out the front, that's perfect. Yeah, that's what Ney was, this crazy badass, just brave. The boldest of the bold was his nickname. The bravest of the brave. He was very, very. He was not a coward at all. These would be much more spread out, not even this fast. Nice close up Cuirassiers. That might be. Yeah, this is Mercer. So Mercer was defending. Mercer didn't actually abandon his guns. He was defending like a little hollow that the cavalry couldn't operate in. And, he was one of the few artillery officers that actually did well at Waterloo. Intermingled cavalry, it would be much more spread out than this. But obviously it's a movie. Canister is murderous at this range, so you wouldn't want to clump up. They did like 14 charges to it. It was not like one big charge, it was multiple charges. And you see British artillerymen abandon their guns. But what they did was they abandoned their guns and they just kept running, and they took the linstocks with them and they took all the equipment with them. So a lot of these guns weren't remanned. Not all, but a chunk of them weren't remanned. Oh, that's interesting. Now you see, watch this artilleryman run here. Here, hide under the limber. Quite smart. I mean, you're probably going to die because the cavalryman will just pull a pistol out and end you. But yeah, hiding under a limber was quite common. And, standards in the middle. Normally you'd make a brigade square out of a couple of different battalions, but and the cannon in the middle. Sorry, in the corners is quite common too. And there would have been, yeah, we actually know which regiments were brigaded with one another, and we have a rough idea of what brigades ended up forming brigade squares and who formed sort of like quasi-divisional squares, though they obviously weren't that big. What the cavalry should do here, sorry I'm rambling, but that's, you know. What the cavalry should be doing here is dismounting and nailing all of those guns. They should be putting out of action, spiking all those guns. They actually tried filming scenes of cavalry charging at the squares and pulling up short, but they couldn't do it because the Red Army soldiers panicked when the cavalry came near them. So that's why there's none of that.
What's he doing? What's Snape doing? What's happening? Can I leave the field for a minute? What's he doing there? How can a man go forward with the cavalry without infantry support?
Very true.
What's the matter with you?
I would not want Napoleon pissed off at me. He was a vengeful man, and I would not want him angry. That square broke. That never happened. There's like 3 squares that broke in the whole Victorian era. 3 British squares. Maybe even 2. One of them wasn't even really broken. Carbineers. These are the elite heavy cavalry with the bronze. It was bronze-plated steel. Again, there's some really dodgy horsefalls here that look really dangerous, and you could definitely not get away with today. There's Marshal Ney. Kneeling, bracing the musket on the ground. That's quite good.
Think of England, men! Think of England! Think of England!
Again, the hat getting shot off. Which is weird because they show a man's ribs exposed later on. It's really weird that they do that. Hay was killed 2 days earlier. And, I'm sure if a man just kept yelling, "Think of England," his men would be quite happy that he was taken out, because that sounds really annoying. Oh, these 70s deaths are great, aren't they? Shakos are wrong. This sort of suicide thing was actually... No, I don't want to say common, but it did happen sometimes. In World War I it was even more common, but this whole like suicide stuff, yeah. This is like the quasi-anti-war message. Yeah, it's made in 1970, so this is sort of like Vietnam era. It's definitely made for a Western audience, even though it was filmed in the Soviet Union. It's so impressive they managed to do all this stuff. Like all this armor and uniforms would have cost a fortune. All these horses, just a fortune. And I get it scaled down, but again, I call this sort of like wargaming scale movies. So it's sort of like, these are the sort of size of regiments we'd have on our tabletop, our battalion sizes. This is La Haissant. This is the famous fire. It was put out once, started again, they couldn't put it out a second time. Retreat was just... They retreated, a couple of handful of men stayed behind, including Privateman Lindau. Or Lindemann? Lindau or Lindemann? It's in my video. And Rifleman Lindau or Lindemann. And he beat a man, he beat a couple of people to death, stabbed some people to death, stabbed one guy to death with a French musket. That's great. And then there's Captain P something. He has like a sword duel and is really, really cool. There was fighting amongst the officers of who would be the last one to leave.
I can only give General Lambert my best wishes.
Again, chin straps were really helpful here. I'm not sure why they're not using them. They did have chin straps.
Move that battery down towards Hougoumont.
Yeah, see, this is this gruesome stuff here. I'm not sure why they were able to show this and not other stuff. Yeah. I may have got Delaney and Delancey mixed up here. Delancey, he did die a couple of days after this. I think I may have got Delaney mixed up with Delancey. That grenadier officer there with the gold thing, that's quite good too. It's a flank company officer. Here's This is meant to be La Haye-Sainte. La Haye-Sainte was defended by some redcoats, but the guys at this point would have been basic rifles. They definitely weren't defended by grenadiers.
The farmhouse is ours! Long live France!
So, yes, sir.
That was much more interesting than the movie makes it look.
Right now, and you tell them that
I'm not sure where this hurricane has come from.
I think
I'm not sure where this cyclone has emerged.
you tell them that at 6 o'clock. Yes, we broke Wellington's forces.
The guy who plays Napoleon's fantastic.
And we won
He's a
the
great,
battle.
great actor.
No. Tell them that we won the war.
It's got that Tom Cruise Valkyrie downfall, no one does an accent type thing.
We can't hold them.
That farmhouse fell after a mother effer of a fight though. Which again you can see on my channel under the La Haye-Sainte videos. More word of warning, they're on my first video, so my editing's a bit off, and my microphone was not as good as this. So yeah, but that was a brutal fight. And there's a fantastic book called The Longest Afternoon, which is great. It's a 3-hour audiobook, very short book, great about the action around La Haye-Sainte.
They're losing the battle.
The famous idiom is the French lost, the British drew, and the Prussians won. I don't think that's true, but you know that's the famous thing they say.
Oh, give me Blucher.
Remember, the whole point of this is to hold Napoleon until Blucher comes. The Prussians have already arrived by this point. The British know the Prussians have arrived, and they're already fighting around Place Noire, whatever it's called. They're not French. And the middle guard or the young guard are already fighting them at there. And the old guard don't break, the middle guard break. You always see this old guard breaking nonsense. The middle guard broke. The old guard formed squares to cover the rest of the army's retreat. Hence why you see them in the square and later in the movie, which didn't happen. Well, it did, but didn't happen. They didn't get massacred.
If you go any further, you will be killed.
Where else should the general die but on the field?
This did happen.
Go back, please.
Napoleon had to be physically restrained. At one point after the battle's over, Napoleon wants to die with the old guard, and he actually has to be physically grabbed and bodily thrown into his carriage, which he had stolen from the Prussians. You see a lot of old guard with medals. You had to have 7 or 11 campaigns. Had to have a whole bunch of service. You had to have, I believe you had to have been wounded, or some kind of medal. So getting into the old guard was not easy.
I'm abandoning my position on the left, sir. I want what remains of us.
Here!
Here!
Every man, every gun, here! It's great.
Here.
You can see the
Every brigade! Every battalion, here!
you can see the Dutch in the background here. You can tell by the plumes.
Put every gun to them, sir. Every gun.
Very good.
Not sure why you're talking to him. He doesn't really have guns. He has shattered cavalry brigade.
Oh, aye, they'll stand.
The 92nd don't stand. They run out of ammunition. They have to retreat. That's just what you do.
If Marshal Blucher doesn't come through now, they'll break every bone in my body.
Good beans, Wellington.
If there is anything in this world about which I know positively nothing, it is agriculture.
I love how Wellington is wearing this sort of like down blue serge frock coat type. Well, not a serge coat, but a frock coat type thing. It's very cool. I like that. Because that's what he actually was wearing. Again, really mass ranks there. They would be a little bit more spread out than this. But that just looks freaking epic. With the... I don't know where they got that napalm strike from, but... There's a lot of smoke here. There wouldn't be this much smoke. There would be a lot of smoke around the actual duels. But it wouldn't be like cloud level smoke like this. Oh, you can see some limbers there. That's going gabions. Cool. Nice. That's an actual French song too.
Sire, the Prussians are in the woods.
Yeah, we know. We've been fighting them for the past 3 hours. Like the Prussians have been there for a long time.
In my life, I should have burnt Berlin.
Raise high the black flags, children.
Bad dub.
No pity,
No mercy.
no prisoners.
I will shoot any man
I see
with pity in his eyes. Again, really bad voice over there, bad dub. Prussians with the, you know, this is the death's head on the Totenkopf death's head type thing. So that's not a Nazi thing, it's a Prussian thing. I think the Panzers had a death's head that was different to the SS death's head, something to do with the jaw. It's called the Totenkopf, but yeah. Totenkopf? I can't remember. Then you get even more confusing. We have the Totenkopf FSS, which is just completely different. That's just, yeah. Dun, da, da, dun, da, da. One white cord hanging down is a fusilier, or I think it's a chasseur, like a light. 2 cords is grenadier for the thing. Is where Blucher's in blue because he used to be a cavalry commander. Prussian hussars just don't have the same style as the French and the British. You also see, okay, I have a problem with this scene, right? If you were gonna do this, which you shouldn't, but if you were, you would fire, advance, fire, advance, fire, advance. You wouldn't just like rear stand up as the second standing up, and then you would shoot. They would massacre their own troops in the back if they did this.
Now, Maitland! Now's your time!
Like that's ridiculously. That's a replay. That's ridiculously dangerous to your own men, and the old guard didn't break. Especially not the grenadiers, which is what these guys are. Never happened. Complete lies. They're obviously just walking forward. Where did all my men go? Where the hell are all those sergeants? They should be kicking the absolute crap out of them.
What are you afraid of?
Sergeant's job is to smack skulls together. That crap started happening.
Son, remember that you're a general. The Prussians are too late. You understand? Too late.
Delusional too.
Don't you understand? Wellington is beaten. Where's your faith?
Superstitious too.
I've been in this position before at the Battle of Marengo. I lost the battle at 5 o'clock, but I won it back again at 7!
Marengo was nowhere near as bad as this. Is that a replay again just close up? They must have done it like 5 times. That looks like the same brigade. Ney did this. He was running around. Well, I don't think it was the old guard. It might have been the middle guard. Bad thing to say to people running away.
Stand with me! Are you the guard?
Back in La Haison. It's pretty light for 8 PM, but I don't know how European... Over here in Australia, it wouldn't be this light at 8 PM.
One more arm! We have them beaten!
This is what made me think Ney wasn't deliberately trying to lose the Battle of Waterloo. Oh, great rain, that'd be nice. Because he did stay behind and put himself in this situation here where he could have just easily been killed.
Nay, Marshal of France!
That's the last words of Peter Stewart Ney, by the way.
Sir, the Prussians are here!
Again, the Prussians have been fighting the French for hours at this point.
The old guard has broken!
Never happened. This movie's fantastic, but it does take liberties with these last few things for cinematic purposes. Otherwise, it's actually really good. I may have been trashing it a little bit more than I should have. But this is just magnificent, the scale of everything. And the uniforms are all great.
If I ever saw 30,000 men run a race before.
When they're wrong, it's only because it's the wrong Shaco with the wrong uniform.
Whole line will advance. In which direction, your grace? Why, straight ahead, to be sure.
Again, they hated one another. So that would have been more like, the whole line will advance, is like in which direct, like snarky, smart-ass shit is all forward. So, again, they despise one another. That's why when he gets his leg shot off, I imagine Wellington was chuckling to himself. Is it Charon? There's a word, the merde thing that he yells, which means shit. That guy there is based on a real historical character who may or may not have, when asked to surrender, yelled merde. Merde means shit in French. Chamboise, something like that. There's a big statue of him But this is historically accurate, as in it's a historical thing that happened. This is also how this happened too.
I've lost my name.
He actually said that. And Wellington said this.
I got some
He probably said it with a big old smile on his face.
Get forward of him!
He probably said that with a big old grin. This prick who had stolen his, had cuckolded his brother. Probably been quite happy to see the lose a leg. Lord Paget, which is Uxbridge. He was Earl of Uxbridge. His name was something Paget, Henry Paget or something. He really was a rebel. When there was this rumours about the Queen being an adulterer and running around with a bunch of different men, which turned out not to be really true. But anyway, the Queen was running around different men, and he was basically slagging the Queen. And a bunch of people asked him, they were attacking him in the street, and he turned around and he said, "May all your wives be like the Queen." Quite funny. He was a bridge burner of absolute extraordinary levels. He was a troll. This happened. Napoleon did this. They had to drag him into a carriage. They bodily threw him into a carriage, which is a Berlin carriage he actually took from Berlin. Hence the name Berlin carriage. Remember, Napoleon's over. His life's over right now. He needs to win this to be the Emperor of France. He loses this, he might as well die. His marshals did drag him and throw his ass in a carriage. Chamboise or something like that. Chamboise. This did happen. The old guard covered the retreat of the army. They didn't break.
We're doing murder, Your Grace.
No British officer at this point would have said that.
help to God. I fought my last battle.
He has. This was his last battle. He would go on into politics. He'd been known as the Iron Duke because he had put iron shutters on his windows because people kept hucking bricks through them, and an iron window carriage because people would huck bricks at that too. This bit happened. The cannon bit didn't happen. It's not how a white flag works, by the way. You can't just run up with a bunch of guys and that's not how it works.
Brave Frenchman! You have done all that the honor of war requires. His Grace the Duke of Wellington invites you to save your lives. Will you agree to surrender?
That's the commanding officer. And again, whether or not he said that is disputed, but it's widely believed that he did say that. This then didn't happen, by the way. They just surrendered anyway. It's like that this is a stupid American Navy thing, where this admiral dies and this captain dies. His last words are "Don't give up the ship," and this becomes like a little motto for the American Navy. But they always forget to mention that after he died, yelling "Don't give up the ship," they immediately gave up the ship. It's just like surrender, go F yourself. And then they surrendered. Like it's one of those things that they didn't massacre them point blank with canister. That would be just brutal. People are brave, but they're not suicidal like this. They would not do this. The horse artillery would never use guns that big. They had 6 and 9 pounders, not 12 pounders. But again, this never really happened, so I guess it's okay. Men very, very dislike murdering other men. Like, it's quite hard to get people to legitimately actually murder people, especially in this time period. Today, it's a little bit more common because you have things like you can actually desensitize people with certain training techniques, firing at pop-up targets, shooting instantly, man-shaped targets. But back in this period, it'd be quite difficult to get someone to kill another human being like this. And this, of course, didn't happen. There's all sorts of theories about, why battalion fire, like why musket fire was so ineffective, and one of the prevailing theories, which comes from the Prussians, is that people just don't want to shoot other human beings, and that the musket is more of a deterrent weapon. And where they did test practices where the musket was found to be actually not that bad, it was quite accurate, but then in combat they were just wildly missing. So yeah, it's like sort of go away. I don't really want to kill anybody or deliberately aim high. Or the old American Civil War thing where you pack like 6 balls down the thing. Yeah. It's different in places like India where you're fighting a bunch of locals who will just slaughter you if they win. If the French had beat the British here, they probably would have just taken a bunch of prisoners. But when you're in India against the Khalsa, like the Sikh army, or up against like some Maharajas with a bunch of badmashers, which are like thugs, or like street criminals, it's a different story. European army v European army, or European v American, would be much more civilized than and more willing to surrender. People got their throats slit. Okay, women would go around after the battle. This happened more in Spain, but and the Belgians women did pretty much the same thing. They went around the battle, and more than one person had their throat slit and their purse snatched. Looting after a battle was quite common. Mercer? Yeah, and this is why, there would be provosts come out with pistols and deal with it. But Mercer, one of the captain we saw before, actually spent the night under a gun limber. He slept under his gun. He was so exhausted. And they cut the scene from the film, but later on, this makes me think this horse thing is a bit, it's a bit dodgy. They originally filmed the scene, but they never put it in the movie of Blucher and Wellington meeting, and the only word they know is quelle affaire, like what an ordeal, or what an affair in French. But they don't show it in the movie for some reason. Quelle affaire is also the name of a board game. It's about Waterloo, which is really, really good, and you should definitely grab it. That's from Alessio Cavatore, one of the masterminds behind Lord of the Rings. Again, the sort of Vietnam era look at the hell of war. There's probably more dead bodies in this than there was totally killed at Waterloo. But a lot of riderless horses too. Those horses be all over the place. And there's no way Wellington would be running around by himself. Some wounded Frenchman would pick a pot shot at him or something. But again, the only bits of the movie I'm sort of mentioning are the very small, slightly off things that are basically done for cinematic reasons, not to be anti-historical. So overall, this is a really, really historical movie. All the uniforms are great. I love the excessive use of Highlanders too. That's a brutal slaughter of Highlanders that did not happen. 69th. Generic anti-war 1970s message. Very faded yellow there. I mean, much brighter than that. These are fresh troops. That's a Wellesley quote as well. Although I should mention he made all these quotes after he had already retired from action. So, it's one of those whole like, oh, war's really glorious when I'm out there killing people and making a fortune and getting a dukedom, which is like it's the highest nobility rank you can get. But after the war's over, oh no, oh my, oh that was so awful. I mean, I could have stopped it at any time. I was complete control of the army. I could have, done all this stuff to save lives. But now that I'm not in the army anymore, I'm going to say how bad it is. That sort of hypocritical hindsight. And that is for us the end of the movie Waterloo. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you'd like me to do other movies, let me know. If I'm able to, I'll have to see if this even gets up on YouTube. So I'm going to get down to edit this. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.